Now, the recent escalation in hostilities between the United States, Israel and Iran has sent shockwaves far beyond the Middle East, reverberating through global markets and presenting risks for emerging economies like South Africa. To help us get a better sense of the impact, we speak now to Dr. Iraj Abedian, Chief Executive at Pan-African Investment and Research Services. Dr. Abedian, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time. As we watch these tensions escalate, the impact is being felt right here at home. The South African rand weakened in early trade today. It's certainly a sign that this ongoing conflict in the Middle East has already rattled investors.
Yeah, thank you, Empo, for invitation, and absolutely to be expected. Of course, this is going to become potentially a very material change to our financial market and economic conditions if and only if this war between the US, Israel on the one hand, and the Iranian regime on the other drags on for more than 3 or 4 weeks. If they cannot wrap it up within 3-4 weeks, then we will see a different type of impact, not only on South Africa, but on the global financial markets in the form of rising energy prices, currency volatility, and an injection of new inflationary dynamics into the global economy, but especially for economies like South Africa that are very import dependent.
We know that historically, South Africa's inflation has been heavily influenced by exchange rate fluctuations and international commodity prices, particularly oil. And we also know that when oil prices rise globally, South Africa feels it very quickly. You said that if is the operative word here, but how soon could we begin to feel the impact, for one, of fuel prices?
Look, we're not going to see at least for another 2 weeks. Remember, our fuel prices are adjusted third Wednesday of each month. If in the next few days, literally, the United States doesn't manage to stop the spread of missile attacks by the Iranian regime, you can expect that this will be what economists call it a temporary or a transitory price volatility, which will then balance out in the following weeks and months. On the other hand, if in the next week or so this escalates, losses on the United States grows up and up, and the Iranian regime shows that it can sustain launching missiles into the neighborhood, and as you mentioned, all the way to Cyprus without defense, and it doesn't run out of the stock of missiles, then it would be a different game in terms of the percentage depreciation of the currency, as well as the percentage increase on the price of fuel oil. Both of them for us is double whammy in terms of inflationary impact.
And as we consider the impact of that different game you mentioned, with fuel price increases come the ripple effects, like the effects on transport and food. And then that is the point where ordinary citizens will begin to feel it, isn't it?
And that will happen only if it becomes a sustainable thing. If it's just 1 month, prices are not going to change that much. Inflationary impact is going to be very limited. However, if it becomes a 6 month, 9 month, 10 month, that will be a completely different story. Remember, Russia invaded Ukraine thinking that it's going to be 6 to 7 days, and 4 years later or 3 years later, we're still there. America may have the same type of problem, may think that they can wrap it up in 3-4 weeks, only to get bogged down in the region. Unlikely, I must say, but war is war. You cannot predict everything. And therefore, only if this war and destruction and instability spreads and becomes a 6 months to 9 months to 12 months, then you will see the impact in our economic dynamics, especially inflationary pressures, very, very soon from next month.
Now, as we try and juggle between the probabilities here, we know that Pretoria is already facing some scrutiny from Washington over its International Court of Justice case against Israel. What impact could the renewed Middle East hostilities have on geopolitical pressure?
A lot of pressure on us. As you know, the South African government decided against all facts and evidence to kind of befriend the Iranian regime, to give it legitimacy, to give it support, to have military exchanges, naval practices, and so on. All of these don't sit well with two groups. One is the United States from a geopolitical point of view, because they interpret that as United States taking a hostile position or posture in geopolitical terms. The second group who will not take that kindly would be the Iranian population, who are fighting a malicious and murderous regime that hundreds of thousands of them are killed and imprisoned, and it's been a battle for 20 odd years. So if the regime changes in Iran, the incoming regime will not take South Africa's position and lack of support for humanitarian sympathy and empathy kindly. And therefore, we end up into a very different kind of geopolitical imbalance and also poor decision making. It will not serve us well in the long term if the situation pans out that way.
What about the economic risks to South Africa if we perhaps even consider aspects like trade access and the preferential arrangements we already have, like AGOA? What are the probabilities in that space?
At the moment, AGOA is kind of quiet, but in terms of a broader geopolitical alliance, remember we depend on the West and US and Europe for our foreign direct investment, for many of our industries, for our capital markets, for our bond markets, especially government bonds. In that regard, the South African national interest is far more aligned to a posture of neutrality, as opposed to a posture of being seen vividly to taking side with the Iranian regime that for 47 years has been shouting death to America, does what it does, throws all kinds of real threat to the American interest, as we can see now panning out. So in that sense, South Africa has to align itself with its constitutional principles of humanitarian protection of rights and freedom, and remain geopolitically far more neutral than it has chosen to do in the recent years.
Very well. Thank you so much for that update, Dr. Iraj Abedian, Chief Executive at Pan-African Investment and Research Services.